What are you watching live? Then contrast that to what are you watching today when you go back and over the game?
Yeah, live, it's kind of like really the operation, how guys are going in and out of from the sidelines, and are we getting out of the huddle quick enough, and are we ready to play? Some of those things, hold my breath for injuries, things like that. But there's some things, in between the snaps that are on film that you're looking for. A lot of times I'll stay on the sideline during preseason. It was pretty crowded down there, so I was up in the box. But sometimes on the sidelines, just kind of seeing how guys react to the coaches and stuff, especially the younger guys, watching some of those things.
How high is your level of concern with Jordan in his development if he's not able to if you only have 3 preseason games as it is, and if he misses one?
Yeah, if he ends up having to miss any time, it's that'll be kind of a bummer. But again, I think through the offseason he's taken a ton of reps with the ones, and then obviously this training camp's been pretty good. And last night was great to see him get out there finally and get some reps. So wouldn't be ideal, but at the same time we're pretty hopeful that he can get back here quick.
Brian, are you going to bring in another quarterback or two this week? And if so, do you just go to Blake or Jake because they were here, or do you just go to somebody else?
Yeah, we're going to look at a few options. Me and Matt, I think, are going to sit down tonight and kind of figure that out. But we'll obviously protect the team, make sure we have somebody here.
So you like to kind of keep at 87, 88 guys just in case something like this where you got to bring in a guy without having to release a guy?
Well, so technically Tuesday at 3 we have to be down to 85. So the new kind of cut down rules. So right now we're at 90. So we'll have to be at 85 on Tuesday. So we'll kind of work through that the next day and a half or so.
Brian, with the joint practices coming up, what do those do for you guys in terms of your evaluation? What kind of stuff are you looking for in the practices?
Yeah, I've always really enjoyed the joint practices from the aspect of you're able to have another team in here in a controlled environment and let those guys compete in a more controlled environment. I think it's really good for your quarterbacks because obviously you can control the situations and keep them clean and not get them hit. So I think that's a really positive of it. You can get quality reps that way. And then for us, just being able to stay here in Green Bay and have another team on your field for a few days really gets you a chance to evaluate another team and see how your guys kind of stack up. And again, I think our guys have been in camp for a while, so seeing different competition. They tend to in certain situations get to know their teammates pretty well and how they play. Having guys come in here that they don't know so well can give you a little bit more insight to how maybe ready they are.
What has happened with this league-wide and here specifically? Like you guys had the Bills in 05, and then Ted never did it again. Yeah. And then you guys obviously 19, and you were going to have the Browns in last year too, I think, right? Yep. So what's been the league trend, and was this something that you thought, hey, when I become a GM, this is something I want to do more of too?
I think, well, certainly the way, the amount of practice time and the way we practice in training camp has changed, right? There's no 2 days, those kind of things, so it's changed a little bit. That's one, and I just think for me, again, in my time here, we haven't done a whole lot of it. The league probably has done more of it than we have, but kind of seeing the ability to control the environment, but you still have kind of high-level competition. Again, I think your head coach and your coaching staff have to kind of embrace it, and Matt's certainly done that. And I think it's always good to have a good partner that's coming in as well, and I think we do obviously this week. So again, it's just another evaluation tool and a way to get your team ready, and that maybe puts a little bit more urgency and stress on your football team.
You had 30 guys out last night, and I know that not every single one of those was a healthy scratch, but a lot of them were. Is this the most solidified you feel like the top of your roster has been over the past few years since you've taken over?
That's a good question. Yeah, I feel really good about our football team. I really do, and I feel good about the guys that we've held and stuff. I think you kind of pulls you in both directions. There's part of you that just wants to get to the season and get started and get going because you feel you got a good squad. At the same time, you know how much work needs to be done, and there's some evaluation that needs to take place. So, you kind of ride the middle there.
So how do you find Dominique Martin?
Again, you guys know I've talked about this. Roster building for us is 365. So, every day that we're in here, we're talking about different guys that our pro scouts have have been grinding through and watching, and we work out a ton of guys that you guys, you know, may or may not know every week, and kind of get our ready lists and emergency boards ready. And, you know, as we need numbers and stuff, you know, the guys that come in here and work out and can help us, we'll sign them. So that's just kind of how we go through it.
Okay, so he's in, I think this is his 5th year, so to speak.
Mhm.
I mean, he's never even been in a training camp. So
Yeah.
what is a guy, what did he show you to show Nerd the
Yeah, I think in Dominic's case, he was kind of he was on the workout circuit with a bunch of teams, and so obviously our guys researched him like anything else. And as we were going through, we were getting a little thin in the defensive back, so we brought him in, and he worked out really well for us, and we signed him.
I was asking J.O. and Vrabel about this, like, 3 years ago, Robert Tunyon is in a position where he got tricked about a text message about him being cut, right? And 2 years ago, Lazard, you cut him at the end of camp.
Mhm.
I mean, and now, last night, they were too valuable to play in a preseason game. When you see guys do that, and you're watching them develop, what does that say to you, to see guys go that far,
Yeah.
and not that long?
Right. Well, first of all, I think it says a lot about them, right? Their work ethic and perseverance, but I think it also says a lot about, I think, how we go about things and understanding that it does take time, you know, and there's a developmental process, and I think there's times you got to be patient, and that's hard to do in this league. But I think when you see talent in a player, you have to give them the time to get better, because they will get better. You know, if they have the work ethic, you know, if they have the right mindset, you know, they will get better. And that's hard in this league. It's hard. I mean, things move fast, and it's hard to be patient and give them that time. But at the same time, I think for a healthy roster, you have to be able to do that.
So on the flip side, do you have to recognize the guys that maybe you drafted or you signed, that the work ethic is not where it needs to be? Like, because you want to give everybody a chance,
Mhm.
but if you start to see kind of the same mistakes, or a guy who still hasn't picked up the playbooks, sort of like that, is that the challenge for you, is to figure
Sure.
out if that's going to happen or
Yeah.
not?
No, there's always that, you know, you can't wait forever, you know, but I think there's usually signs along the way of whether they're going to be willing to make the sacrifices that you need to make. And, you know, every player is different, and how they mature and how they develop. And, you know, whenever you bring a player into your program that you think has the ability to really help you, you'd like to give them all the time in the world, but that's not always the case, because this train moves pretty fast sometimes, and you got to do what's best for the team. So.
You get more used to this part of your job as the years gone on a little bit, of having to, 85 on Tuesday, obviously there'll be more cuts down the line. Does it get easier a little bit?
I don't think it ever gets easier having to release players and cut down, because you see the time and effort these guys put into this. I will say, you know, it's it's always tough, and we got away from those early cuts for a while before kind of the pandemic hit, where we were able to keep all the players until that final cut. I think that's the correct way to do it, because obviously when you get into that last preseason game, you want to give those guys every opportunity to kind of like go out there and play, because not only for us, but then for also the 31 other, you know, teams in the league to evaluate them. So I'd like to get back to that, where we get back to where we keep everybody up until the final cut. I think that's better for the organization and better for the league. Yeah, it never gets easier when you have to move on from any players.
That's something, if all the general managers approach the NFL about that, that it could be a talk in the future?
Yeah, like I said, we went away from it and got back to where we were actually keeping the 90 all the way through the 53 cut, and then the pandemic kind of changed some things. But I don't want to speak for all the other general managers, but I just know from a personnel standpoint, especially as you get into these later preseason games and the last one, the more bodies you have, the better you feel.
When you've had some early draft picks and maybe they're not quite panning out, how long is it, that early draft pick thing, how long does that matter until you realize it's just time to cut bait?
I think it's a constant evaluation, and it's going to be different for each guy. I think sometimes you get to a certain stage where it's not good for the team to keep them around, then you have to move on. But certainly if we invest a draft pick in you and we invest time into you, we're going to give you an opportunity to see if you can make it.
Goody, so you and Russ obviously know the free agent market before free agency starts, right? You have a pretty good idea that, say, there's going to be teams that are going to pay Corey, for example. So as you evaluated Josh, you didn't know if he was going to necessarily be there for your second round pick. But did you see a guy right away that could, in your evaluation, be a first day starter, and how have you watched him last night and through training camp kind of maybe establish that you were right about that?
Yeah, I think as we go through a pretty long 3.5 weeks of draft meetings in February before free agency hits. So we have a pretty good idea of the class. It was a good center class this past year, so I felt there was going to be an opportunity to take a center. I don't really think that impacted the Corey decision. It was just happened to be coincidence. But with Josh, I think as we watched him early, I mean, he was a really good player at a high level program. And then when the pro day was where things kind of all came in, at least for me, it came into focus. He didn't really do anything at the pro day, but he was around, and you could tell he was an absolute leader of that group. And as you guys know, being up close, he's not a small man. I mean, he's a big, imposing figure, and you never know, how quickly these guys are going to adjust to our game and how they can come in. And obviously, being a center in our offense with our quarterback is not something that guys can just walk into. And he's done a heck of a job so far. I mean, he's had growing pains like all these guys have had, but his work ethic and I think he's tenacious at it, and we're excited about him.
Hey, Brian, one of my least favorite parts of this job is trying to read into cryptic Instagram posts and Twitter.
Don't do it.
Unfortunately, that's become a part of it. So your quarterback and your receiver are posting pictures of Clay Matthews and bringing back. Are they having fun, or do they want you to sign him?
I think that's probably a question for them. I've had no discussions about that, but I think that's probably a better question for them. But it's like I tell my kids, you should stay away from that stuff.
I wish I could. Is there any chance that you might bring Clay Matthews back?
Like I said, we've had no discussions at this time about that.
But have you had discussions about getting an Instagram account or?
Me?
Yeah, you.
Yeah, one day. So.
Hey, Brian, we've heard it sounds like the expanded practice squad is still in effect for this year, the 3-week IR rule. What you're able to do last year where you could elevate a couple of guys for game day, but then put them back on the practice squad without exposing them, is that something that's continuing as well? Is that still available to you?
Yeah, they're actually, it sounds like it thinks that's going to be, I think they're still working through that, but the ability to do the kind of the standard elevation, not the COVID elevation, was in the CBA. That was kind of part of it. So we're expecting that to obviously to continue unless something changes. For a personnel guy, it's fantastic. I mean, it's just, the ability to be able to manage your roster and do those things. There's salary cap implications that can make it difficult, but yeah, we expect that to carry on.
Goody, what do you think you've seen from Bunches? I mean, he had a pretty good family night, but obviously we're talking about other things after that. But he looked pretty good again last night. What do you think you have there, especially for a guy who's played one game in 2 years?
Yeah, I was excited for him because obviously he hasn't played in a long time. So getting out there last week in family night, but then really, last night, the first game he's been in a couple of years. I was excited for him. I could tell he was excited, to get out there and perform. He's an imposing figure, as you guys know. He's a big, long, physical athlete, and yeah, I think as he's kind of adjusted into our offense and stuff, last night was a really good step.
Did you learn anything about him in that setting? You evaluated him up close for over a year. He's all these one reps that he's had.
Yeah.
Did you learn anything about him last night in that first half?
I don't know if I learned anything. I mean, he's always kind of been, a guy that can make plays, whether it was in college or, in his time in Carolina. And I think he's just one of those guys that, he's able to kind of do a lot of different things. He's kind of a post-up player, so he can go up and take it away from you. He's got speed to kind of pressure you on the perimeter. But he's also, for a guy his size, he's pretty good in and out of his breaks, So to see him kind of, again, first time in a couple of years, be able to go across the middle, catch some balls, take some hits, break some tackles, do those things, I think it was, again, it was good for him, and I was excited for him.
Brian, Gary Gray was in here talking about Kevin King, Eric Stokes the other day, and generally speaking, he said he doesn't think a player can lose their job when they're injured. Are you of the same belief? Like, for example, you obviously have a couple wide receivers who are on that bubble who are hurt right now.
Right.
That obviously doesn't help you, but
Yeah.
can it be used against them that they're hurt?
Yeah, I mean, I think we always talk around here, the number one ability is availability, right? whenever you're, whether, and sometimes it's just unfortunate circumstances, but if you can't be out there, it's hard. It's hard to get better when you can't practice. It's hard to, become a big part of the offense or defense if you can't be out there. So, again, I understand not wanting to let anyone lose their job because of injury, but at the same time, this train will move forward. So if you can't find a way to get out there, it will affect it.
What are the challenges of evaluating off of, first of all, it's great to have preseason games to evaluate off of. So
And fans, that was good to be back in that stadium with all those fans,
But what are the, how do you evaluate your running backs, right? Steno, everybody's pissed off that he didn't feel good about the offensive line performance there. So how do you evaluate running backs? How do you evaluate Jordan when he's maybe playing with some guys that it might be different if he's playing with Devontae? What's the process for you there?
Yeah, I think the preseason games are a part of it, but also the practices and the situations that we put them in. So, I think you're constantly kind of looking and just understanding how the different areas will affect things. You can be as good a runner as there is in the league, but if we can't get the blocking up front right, then it's not going to work. And so it all goes together. That's what makes this sport kind of, so unique, is that everybody's so dependent on each other. But it's one of those things, I think, there's traits and skill sets we look for, and if those are there, you're going to give guys a lot of opportunity to prove that they can do it on the field, and so like last night, there was different combinations, we had different centers, we had different guards, tackles, all that is taken into consideration, and you're trying to evaluate individually, but then obviously Matt and his staff are also, evaluating how we're working as a team and a unit, so. It kind of all goes in hand, and I've said this before, that it's not just about finding the right 53 or 69 players or however you want to cut it up, but it's finding the right guys to make up the best team, not just the best players. So that's what we're after, and it's a challenge, but I do like the guys in that locker room right now that are competing for those spots.
Do one more in person.
Hey, Brian, Matt told us earlier that one of the things they'll probably do this week with the Jets guys is maybe the staffs will go out together. Your DBs, for example, were coming in here talking about how we're bringing candy and pistachios in, and there just seems to be more of that this year than maybe couldn't do that last year. In your department, has there been anything that you guys have been able to do this camp that's just been a little more fun and not something you couldn't do last year with all the limitations?
Yeah, I'll say this: the scouting staff, we keep that stuff under wraps. Let's just say that.
Yours in your garage.
Yeah, right. As a scouting staff, it's fun. It's like camp's always a fun time to get everybody together, and especially the guys that are on the road and you haven't had to see them. So we do some things, and some golf things, and some dinners here and there. And so especially not being able to do that as much last year. I think the guys just really appreciated being up here and being able to be back around the team, which is, when you're on the road a bunch, and I certainly have a lot of experience with that. It's nice to be around the players and stuff, but we also get a lot of opportunities where there's a Senior Bowl, the Combine, different places like that. So we kind of have our markers, but that's not something I can speak about outside those rooms. So.
All right, let's go to Zoom. Sarah, go ahead.
Yep, we have three in here. Steve McGarvey.
Just wondering, the joint practices you're having this week, are they as good an evaluating tool as the exhibition games themselves, or is there something to be said for seeing how players do with the big crowds and the game situations?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think the joint practices are a better evaluation tool than maybe just your normal training camp practices, but nothing. I don't think anything competes with actual live games where players have to make decisions, without their coaches in their ear, and have to overcome bad plays and successes and things like that. So. Yeah, the joint practices I really like because, again, like I said, it's a controlled environment where you can have a different level of competition, but I don't think it compares to a game.
Aaron Engler.
Brian, going back to last year, a few days into camp, you guys shut us down as far as what we were allowed to tweet about. Fast forward now to this training camp and preseason. Has it felt like around the league, because you guys said you monitor everybody, you're looking at everything, and you didn't want to be at a competitive disadvantage? This year we're back to tweeting about lineups and who's playing where and what have you. Has it felt like a geyser of information has opened up as compared to last year for you guys? Because obviously there's camps and there's orders and there's all sorts of things going on this year that weren't last year.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we're kind of in the beginning stages where, obviously the last month or so our guys have been compiling that stuff, and this is the first preseason weekend. So as we hit our meetings this week, a lot of that information you're talking about, we'll kind of discuss and go through, so. You know, because my social media presence isn't nearly as good as it should be. I'm not exactly sure the difference between last year and this year, but we got a bunch of guys that, you know, kind of go through the clips and the different stuff that we'll kind of start talking about this week. So ask me again next week and I'll probably have a better answer for you.
And last one, Chancellor Johnson.
Hey Brian, obviously you guys saw some of the game college deal with you losing your last pick on. What were your general thoughts that you saw from him yesterday in game action?
No, I thought he did a nice job. I mean, obviously, you know, Kylin's played big-time ball in the SEC, so I didn't think it was too big for him. You know, we asked him to do some kick return stuff, which we're excited about, so it was good to get him back there and get a couple reps under his belt. But obviously, you know, we didn't do as well as we wanted to in the run game. I thought when he had opportunities, he made the most of them, and obviously that screen pass was a really nice, you know, play to kind of cap his day. So we're excited about what he's been able to do in camp so far, and I think he's got a bright future.